The wife is the husband's housekeeper. If she defies, divorce. As Tony threatened with words, stealing my black card and squandering money, he took advantage of my work commitments to go on vacation overseas. There is no way I can forgive such ridiculous behavior. Okay. Having reached the end of my tether, I casually handled his calls and set about executing a terrifying plan for revenge. My name is Hillary Clarkson. I was once a top star in America, sweeping through as a former actress. Having also starred in Hollywood, I was reported internationally as having charmed men all over the world. My popularity at the time was that extraordinary. The reason I retired from the entertainment industry was due to marrying Tony, who was my former manager and assistant. He managed to support my hectic schedule flawlessly, taking care of everything from my health to my personal life. Even after retiring, he has been helping with the business I am currently handling. Now, as a couple, we manage several apparel-related companies together. It was 10 years ago, at the age of 21, that I retired from the entertainment industry to marry Tony. The media flooded our home daily as my retirement was announced at the peak of my popularity. I received mountains of fan letters daily pleading, "Don't quit." My retirement even caused a social phenomenon as it impacted many people's work. Despite various baseless rumors and weekly magazine features, Tony and I married amidst the pinnacle of happiness, supported by those around us. Just before retiring, I launched my own apparel brand, and Tony, now an employee there, works with me. He handles the accounting, while I run the office, pushing our models as a skilled businesswoman. Our life may seem perfect, but it's not quite so. Tony has been acting strange lately. He returns home exhausted daily, sighing and giving me a disheartened look. "Tony, what's wrong? You haven't been yourself lately. Is something up at work?" Knowing he tends to bottle things up, I often check on him during our time together. He struggles to express his worries and complaints, always waiting for me to take action. Although it can be tiresome at times, I've never resented it because he has always been more troublesome for me. My gratitude has always prevailed. You know, I'm tired of always being a side character and doing whatever Hillary says. I thought he was just grumbling about not fitting in with the younger colleagues at work, but then he threw words at me that I never expected, and I was shaken. "What's gotten into you all of a sudden? You've never said anything like this before." Tony often spoke in a way that hurt me, and I was aware that it was often his way of lashing out. When work becomes stressful, he starts saying things like this. He always acts firm at work, so he probably feels he has nowhere else to vent. I had often lashed out at him when I was an actress, so I understood his feelings. However, his words were so unexpected that my voice trembled. I've been holding it in. You are busy, and frankly, I'm the one being supported. Though Tony earns well, he is ultimately an employee of our company. My income is higher. However, being married, who earns more or less shouldn't matter. His words were a shock to me. Even when you come home, it's all about work. You never pay any attention to me. When we go shopping together, you just buy whatever you like. Do you know how that makes me feel? I've been enduring a lot. Why don't you consider that more? Acting like a spoiled child, Tony looked at me with dissatisfaction. Honestly, these words irritated me. Our household is almost entirely managed on my income. His salary is his to use as he likes because I told him so, as a thank you for all the trouble he's been through and the support he's provided. There was a time during our poorer days when he supported and provided for me. Even after retiring, he gave up his private time to support me, and I thought I was repaying him, but hearing such unreasonable things was painful. The clothes and accessories I bought during our shopping trips were purchased with money I saved from managing our finances. If anything, I was the one making sacrifices. With these thoughts swirling in my mind, anger welled up inside me. You are too free. I want more time off too, and I want to travel leisurely. Since joining the company, my salary is good, but I have no time. I stepped back from the entertainment industry to support your company. Don't I deserve some gratitude? Stop prioritizing your own time and give me some time to rest. When I retired, he continued in the management field alone in the entertainment industry. However, once my work started to take off, he changed his mind and said he wanted to support me. If I stay at your company, you won't be lonely, right? I want to be a support to you, Hillary. I wanted to spend more time with Tony, so I allowed him to join the company. I never asked him to, yet why must I be spoken to this way? Isn't this life enough? Isn't he being too selfish? While I was thinking this, Tony made a suggestion that seemed like adding insult to injury. That's it. My parents are about to turn 60, right? I want to celebrate it, so can I take some time off then? That would be great. Then I won't ask for anything more. But I want 2 weeks off. I want to take them on an overseas trip. They've never been to France, and I want to show them the delicious food and beautiful scenery there. When I was on guard, wondering what would be demanded of me, Tony's unexpected request took me by surprise. I felt uneasy. For a mere 2-week vacation, there was no need to spoil the mood like this. He could have simply applied for paid leave at our famously employee-friendly company. People here don't disdain taking their paid leave, and the company is well equipped to handle the absence of one person. Yet, he approached me directly with what seemed like picking a fight, which felt strangely off. However, it was merely speculation without any proof to confirm my feeling of unease. I responded calmly, albeit with restrained irritation. I don't mind, but I can't do it this year. We have important fashion shows lined up at the office, and I also need to proceed with the preparations for Paris Fashion Week. My schedule won't align, so could you possibly check if next year would work? I can adjust my schedule for next year. As my in-laws' 60th birthday celebration, it was impossible for me as their daughter-in-law not to attend. However, my company had 2 major events upcoming this year, and I had no room to fit in a vacation during my private time. I suggested rescheduling, but Tony refused with a smile. It's fine. We'll just celebrate with my side of the family. I want to spend some uninterrupted family time. Being in accounting, a week away won't really affect my work, right? His mention of wanting undisturbed family time hurt. It felt as if he was implying that I was a disturbance. So, how about it? I can have some free time too, right? Tony has always had a way of speaking without malice. His straightforward and honest nature is endearing, yet his impulsive remarks are his flaw. No one is perfect, and I chose him as my life partner, flaws included. However, his words were unacceptable. Even if he didn't mean it that way, why should I be spoken to like this? Doesn't he care about me at all? Hey, Hillary, are you listening to me? We owe a lot to Tony's parents. Although I can't often visit my in-laws due to work, they treat me like their own child and always praise how hard I work. I'm so happy to have such a wonderful daughter-in-law. My mother-in-law has been pleased since I married into the family, and my father-in-law joyfully celebrated our wedding. It's their 60th birthday. I understand the desire to celebrate it this year. However, the way he spoke made it impossible for me to respond pleasantly. It's not a problem. Take 1 week or 2, as you like. Unable to contain my anger at his terrible manner of speaking, I openly showed my upset. This must have been the last straw for Tony. He seemed offended by my words, stood up abruptly, and left the living room without a word. We have separate bedrooms due to work, and from that day until he left for his trip, we did not see each other at all. Is that really true? Your husband is being too harsh, isn't he? On the day Tony left for his trip, my secretary, noticing something was off, pressed to know what had happened. She has been an excellent support since the start of my business. Being women, we often find common ground, and I trust her perhaps even more than my husband. She's quick thinking and supports me promptly whenever I'm feeling down or about to make a mistake. I cherish her as much as family. She looks up to me like a real sister, and I often consult her. Her advice is always frank and wise beyond her years, helping me immensely. Noticing my unusual demeanor, she expressed concern. At first, I hesitated, but continuing to work like this could be detrimental. I decided to confide everything that had happened up to today. She visibly angered as I explained. If I were you, I'd have snapped back by now. You've been too lenient with your husband. I get that you love him, but you can't let him take you for granted. When my secretary spoke a truth that sounded like it came from someone older, it deeply wounded me. In a world where everyone hesitates to speak their mind to me, she alone faces me as an equal. This experience was refreshing and comforting for me. As people rise in rank, they tend to become more humble and reserved. In this context, having someone like her, who confronts me head-on, is truly invaluable. You're right. What should I do? Can you still call him? Why not have a talk after work today? Don't worry about ruining his trip, this isn't the time for hesitations. If things continue like this, it could lead to a divorce crisis. She urged me like an older sister, leaving me with nothing to say but agree. After lunch, as the workday was short, I followed her advice and called Tony, who was in France. With a 7-hour time difference, my noon was their early morning, possibly still sleeping. I had emailed him to expect a call after he woke up, so he should have been prepared. I called, but there was no answer. Maybe they're still sleeping their time. I'll try calling again later. After trying every half hour with no response, I became worried and reached out to my mother-in-law to ask about Tony's situation. Hillary, you're working hard. I'm sorry we went on this trip just among ourselves. Your father and I told Tony it would be better if you were here, but he insisted. Her gentle nature contrasted the strict education mom she used to be, as Tony had told me. She always cares for me despite my busy schedule. No, it's my fault. My company's been so busy this year that I couldn't make time. Let's plan something special to celebrate next year, shall we? Oh, don't worry so much. Just having this wonderful trip is more than enough for us. When my mother-in-law gently mentioned it with a smile, I felt something was off. A present? I heard a term I didn't recognize and asked what she meant. It seemed my mother-in-law was also surprised by her own words. She explained with a voice full of astonishment. Oh. Isn't that right? Tony told me that this trip was fully covered by you since you couldn't join us. What? I shouted through the phone, completely unaware of such an arrangement. My reaction made it clear to my mother-in-law that I had no knowledge of this. She hastily continued. Isn't this trip arranged by you? Tony paid for everything with your card, so I naturally thought it was from you. In addition to my in-laws, Tony and his sister's family, a total of 5 people, were on this trip. Just the plane tickets alone would cost about $1,000 each, and with all other expenses included, the total would easily exceed $8,000. Using such a large sum without consulting me was outrageous. Plus, I usually handle even our living expenses. Tony doesn't gamble or smoke, so his entire salary should be intact. He certainly earns enough to afford such expenses without needing to use my money. Yet here we are. His not answering the phone added to my growing anger. Noticing my distress, my mother-in-law spoke with concern. Hillary, are you all right? We'll definitely pay back the full amount later. Tony was supposed to cover all travel expenses, so something seemed off. We decided to visit you later and return our share of the costs since we haven't seen you in a while. This trip might be based on an outrageous plan. Concerned for me, my mother-in-law continued to speak gently. You and Dad haven't done anything wrong. It's also your 60th birthday celebration, so please use that money for your enjoyment. I'll make sure to collect from Tony. But could you tell me more about how this trip came to be? I wondered what Tony was doing over there, as he hadn't answered any calls. This trip must have been carefully planned months in advance, using me without my knowledge. As I listened to my mother-in-law, I began to suspect that Tony was exploiting me. Actually, it was Tony's sister and her husband who suggested this trip. It turned out the idea came not from Tony but his sister and her husband, who always seemed to find fault with me. My brother-in-law, an executive at a rival company, looked down on me because I was a female CEO and showed displeasure whenever we met. Tony's sister, a prideful woman, had always dominated him, and he often complained that he couldn't stand up to her before our marriage. Despite how they used Tony against me, it was unacceptable. They disliked me, and I had tried to avoid them as much as possible. Yet, they manipulated Tony into planning this trip. It appears that Tony had been pressured by his sister and her husband to pick a fight with me, probably hoping to exclude me from the trip and bring Tony along as their financial source. I'm so sorry, we didn't know anything. Tony told us not to contact you directly because you were busy, so we planned to thank you when we got back. Unaware of their son's actions, my in-laws would have unintentionally exposed the scheme if they had contacted me, potentially causing a rift between us. My in-laws, who don't fully understand how busy my work is, consider Tony's advice absolute. Therefore, they strictly adhere to his words and had apparently decided to express their thanks upon returning home. Hillary, did you give Tony a card or something? He was paying with a black card I've never seen before. What? Prompted by my alarmed reaction, my father-in-law, who must have been listening, posed the question. When he mentioned the black card, I hastily checked the safe. The black card he referred to was indeed the company's important black card, which should only be accessible by me and Tony, who knew the safe's password. I had thought that Tony, of all people, would not engage in something as dishonest as embezzlement. However, I discovered that a card that should have been in the safe was missing, revealing that Tony had been secretly embezzling company funds. As the accountant, he could easily manipulate the books. My rage peaked when I realized he was misusing company money. I explained this to my in-laws. Upon learning this shocking truth, both of them probably felt the blood drain from their faces. They fell silent, lost for words, and my mother-in-law began to panic. What should we do? We've inadvertently become accomplices to this embezzlement, haven't we? We need to take responsibility. We'll bring Tony back to the US immediately. We're as guilty, even unknowingly. Let us face the consequences when we return. I refused his offer of taking responsibility. It was not their fault, they were merely manipulated by Tony and his sister's family. There's no need for that, Father. You were both tricked by Tony. You're not to blame. But I can't just forgive them for this. No need for penance, but will you help me with what I plan next? Yes. I've turned a blind eye to Tony's actions before, thinking it was just a minor flaw of mine. Tony takes me for granted, assuming he can just apologize to fix things. This isn't just a marital issue, it's a company issue too. We need to teach him a serious lesson. Understood. We'll help with anything you need. Thus, my in-laws and I began to devise a plan of revenge. I was surprised by my own cunning in coming up with such a plan quickly, but my affection had clearly turned to sheer resentment and anger. Initially hesitant, my in-laws agreed, recognizing their own responsibility as parents. My in-laws, having agreed to my plan, were now my allies. In the midst of our conversation, an unexpected call came from Tony. I ended the call with my in-laws and answered Tony's call. What's up? We're enjoying a family trip here, and you say it's important to talk? His words, tinged with sarcasm, only added to my irritation. You took your time contacting me. Were you up to something? Huh? No way. I was just having a drink at a nearby cafe with Mom and Dad. That confirmed his lie. I had just been on the phone with my in-laws, and there were no noisy cafe sounds in the background. Besides, there's no reason for them to lie to me. He was probably out causing trouble with his sister and her husband, destroying the relationship we had built over time with his careless words. I felt my affection for him cool completely. Oh, really? By the way, Tony, you haven't been using the company's expenses for personal stuff, have you? My sudden probing question clearly unsettled him. What's this all about? His tone shifted drastically from casual to serious, showing his true nature. Is this his true nature? His tone shifted drastically from the submissive demeanor he had previously shown in front of me, as if he now saw me as an adversary. In response, I confronted him with a resolute attitude. An audit is coming up soon at the company, so I was just making sure our financial management is in order. Are you doubting me? It was just an innocuous question, but his reaction suggested he was aware of his wrongdoing. Tony's response was so poorly judged it bordered on a blunder, causing me to burst out laughing unintentionally. What's wrong? I'm just concerned, and you're acting as if I'm accusing you. Is there something you're worried about? No big deal. More importantly, the house isn't a mess when I get home, is it? Perhaps realizing that digging himself deeper would be a bad idea, he suddenly changed his attitude and shifted the conversation. Why doesn't he realize that such behavior only makes him look more suspicious? In a way, I have to admire his stupidity. I wonder. I'm busy with work too. Give me a break. I hate the idea of coming home to a dirty house with bugs crawling around. A wife is her husband's maid. Disobey and it's divorce. The director often threatens his wife like that, but are we going to end up doing the same? You wouldn't like that, would you? So, please keep the house clean. I had never seen him getting along with that executive director. The story he told was clearly his own true feelings. Yet aware of his weaker position, he used another person as a shield in his argument, which only made me sigh in disdain. All right, I'll keep that in mind. There was no further need to speak with him. Tony clearly looked down on me and was even misusing company funds. Embezzlement is a criminal offense that could get him immediately fired. I wouldn't show mercy, even to my spouse. But simply getting him arrested wouldn't satisfy me. After hanging up with Tony, I immediately called a certain place. The next day, as I was busy preparing for a fashion show, a frantic series of calls came in from Tony. Realizing it was him late at night while I was out for a specific reason, I let my secretary drive and I answered Tony's call on speakerphone. Where have you been? What have you been doing? His unusually harsh tone surprised both my secretary and me. I've been working. What's the matter? Did you do something yesterday? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. Tell me the truth. What did you do? In the background, I could hear several Frenchmen confronting Tony and his sister's family. It sounds quite noisy there. Something wrong? No, it's nothing. He began to stammer, realizing he'd be in a worse position if he admitted anything. I decided to explain to him the grim reality he was about to face. Too bad, isn't it? To wake up from your lavish dream in France overnight. But it's your own fault, using other people's money like that. Did you do something? While he was still reacting, I revealed what I had done. I had contacted the president of the credit card company I worked with. Despite it being after hours, the president, who owed me favors, agreed to put a hold on the company card first thing in the morning. Because the credit card was not supposed to be used fraudulently, the stores would not get paid by the credit card company, which meant they would bear the loss. However, since Tony was supposed to settle his bill at checkout, the card being blocked meant he couldn't pay and was now stuck being questioned by the hotel staff. Tony, Mom and Dad have already checked out. The taxi they reserved took them away, and there's no one left to pick us up. Cornered, his sister panicked and bombarded Tony with questions. He turned his anger towards me. Do you think you can get away with this? Are you okay with us getting divorced? Please do. I'd rather not have a husband who embezzles company funds. I've already spoken to a lawyer, and we'll proceed with the divorce proceedings. Good luck. What? Seeing my unfazed demeanor, Tony became even more flustered. I've turned a blind eye to many things you've done until now. It's true you've supported me in my work, and I've been grateful for that. But I've reached my limit. My patience has finally snapped. No way. Realizing he was in a dire predicament as I openly expressed my anger, Tony let out a pathetic cry. The receptionists relentlessly demanded payment from the increasingly desperate Tony and his group, who had resorted to using a guide because they couldn't speak French. As I listened to their situation, an idea came to me, and I suggested to Tony to let me speak to them. Let me guess, none of you speaks French, right? Why don't you switch the call over to them? I'll talk to them for you. Are you going to help? I'd gladly switch. Thinking I had reconsidered my stance and was offering help, Tony quickly handed his phone to them. I explained the situation to the receptionists in French, and they were quick to understand, thanks to their easygoing nature. To ease their worries about what might happen next, they gave me their contact information, which my secretary noted down. They readily agreed to a deal with me, and after a friendly chat, they handed the phone back to Tony. What happened? Did you sort it out? Yes, I've handled the talking. The rest is up to you guys. Really? You saved me, Hillary. I really appreciate it. I love you. Just then, he was probably called over by the reception staff. Unaware of anything, Tony ended our call and followed them. Are you sure about this? It probably won't end well. That's perfect, isn't it? It's the ideal place for them to see hell. An hour later, as expected, Tony called back frantically. Answering the call, I heard his distressed and pathetic voice. Hillary, what's going on? What is this place? Crying out, Tony showed me via video call a scene from Goutte d'Or in Paris. Tony and his sister's family had been brought to Goutte d'Or, stripped of their belongings, and were in a dire state. Being taken to one of the most dangerous neighborhoods was honestly beyond my expectations. When I had spoken with the receptionist, he had said, I was a big fan of yours. I've prepared a tough punishment for them, leave it to me. But I never imagined it would be Goutte d'Or. The severity of the location made me burst into laughter. Lucky you're still alive in that neighborhood. It's considered the most dangerous place in Paris. It's a miracle you're alive. What? Hillary. What does this mean? Explain this and come help us right now. They could hear everything since it was a video call. Behind them, many homeless people were causing a commotion, curious about what was happening. You guys have been causing trouble for Hillary. You reap what you sow, you need to reflect on your actions. As my father-in-law and mother-in-law appeared on the call, Tony's sister's family looked shocked. Mom? Dad? What are you doing here? A friend of Hillary's flew us back on his private jet. We came back to the US and asked Hillary to pick us up. We knew you were trying to frame Hillary. We asked her to do whatever she liked with you. As the crowd around them grew noisy, asking what was going on, the locals didn't hold back. If you wore anything that looked valuable in such a dangerous neighborhood, even women were not spared. With the crowd raising their voices during the video call, they became an easy target. I spoke to the onlookers in a tone they could hear, with a smile. I told them that these men were scum who had used my card illegally and treated me horribly every night. Do as you please with them. I want them to see hell. I pleaded, and the locals excitedly agreed, saying, Leave it to us, baby. The call ended abruptly, likely because someone snatched the phone. Since then, Tony and his group have been living in fear in Goutte d'Or. They are treated like slaves by the locals, and they can't afford to return to America. They're essentially trapped abroad. I confirmed the events with the hotel reception afterward. A friend of mine happens to be a boss in Goutte d'Or, and he agreed to look after them in exchange for treating him to some good liquor. Under the condition that they wouldn't be harmed, the negotiation was settled. In return, I agreed to sing at the hotel soon. The only CD you released when you were active is still my treasure. As thanks, your live singing will do. Come stay at our hotel sometime. I'll tell the manager to treat you. Thus, my revenge on Tony and his group was successful. Since then, I have managed to divorce Tony with the help of the hotel guys. I feel refreshed and enjoy spending time with my in-laws. Tony's sister and her husband were fired for skipping work without notice. Their phones were taken by locals, so they had no way to communicate. My in-laws explained the situation well, so there was no police involvement, and no one cared about them anymore. Thus, my ties with Tony were completely severed. Since then, I have been focusing on my work while enjoying my days. Occasionally, I call the receptionist to inquire about Tony and the others. They are still living in hellish conditions, but I don't feel sorry for them, given the extent of their retribution. I only asked that their lives not be taken, and I continue to enjoy my life.